Hey, it's Mazzy. Welcome back. Remixes, remasters, repackage, extra tracks, all that kind of stuff for record companies to resell you the records again. Now, I see no problem with that. If you're a fan of an artist, sometimes you like to dive in and follow into various versions of a song, of an album, of a record. I want to talk about remixes, the good, the bad, and the ugly of remixes, because there are so many styles of remixes and things that are done for good or for evil or just for artistic expansion and creations, which I adore sometimes. So again, this is a subjective presentation of some records that I have. Some I love the way they've changed the original intent and sound of the music, and some here that I think are atrocious and they should have just left it alone. But you know, there are people that love the ones that I hate here. So we're gonna dive in. You ask, why do I have things I hate? Well, follow along, please. Look at your program and follow along. This concept or this video came about because of David Sylvian. I am a huge fan of all his work, his entire career, originally from the band Japan out of the UK in 1978. I saw them Dingwalls, accidentally walking into a bar, pub, restaurant there in London, and I didn't know who they were. And I kind of followed them along, and then they got more creative and more artsy, and some of those fabulous books like Polaroids and, well, you know the like. David Sylvian starts a solo career on Virgin Records, and his work, even though it's really beautiful baritone voice, experimental bits, it was still accessible. And then he leaves Virgin, and I believe in 2005, he debuts with this experimental piece of music, Blemish. I am a massive fan of this, and I've showed this on my channel many times, and I know I've gotten feedback where people have bought it because of me just pushing it and talking how much I love this record, and they don't get it. Fair enough. It's not for everybody. And I recently listened to a conversation with David Sylvian from about 20 years ago when this came out, The Only Daughter, the Blemish Remixes. And David Sylvian, in that interview, discussed how he's not really a fan of remixed records and remixed things. And you know, a couple people have come to him over the years at that point and wanted to remix things. Now, this record is an experimental record, digital, analog in nature, recorded, you know, in the computer realm, but pretty much all with his guitar and amp and feedback and pedals. And in fact, not a lot of extra effects, although there's some times when it seems like he just left his electric guitar against his twin reverb or whatever amp he was using. Apparently he just had one or two guitars and one amp, and that's kind of how he did this. Now there are some other electronic effects added and layered somewhat, but it's a very minimal record. Sometimes you just hear the vibrato of the, you know, that foot pedal that comes with most of those Fender amps back in the day, probably today still, where you have the vibrato and the reverb pedal, and that's it. That's what this is like, and his beautiful low voice, very poetic, very, you know, minimal. He really has a Japanese sense of his artwork and his musical style. Not that it sounds Japanese, but the minimalist side of it. And then he let, a couple years later, not long, I think, just a couple years, this was just released on vinyl. Now, the CDs are fine. You almost don't need the vinyl, but I happen to love this record. Again, an all-time favorite record, and finally, several years ago, I've been waiting for this record on vinyl, but the CDs are fine because it's a very electric record, and it flows really well in the long form of a compact disc. Various different artists take the multi-tracks, take his recordings and add things to them and embellish them or strip them back. They're already very minimal, and this really makes it a beautiful, ethereal piece. Massage music, maybe, night music, early Sunday morning music, possibly. But this companion of these two pieces, and I just love when they do a remix version of something, you get kind of these yin yang cover art pieces. I think if you're ever going to remix an album in any way, a standard kind of remix where you have an engineer, producer take the thing and just maybe clear it up or modernize it, good or bad or ugly, that's your, you decide on that. But I like when they go in a really different direction. And for the sake of remixing, just for the sake of remixing, to me is a little silly. But this is one of those cases where it's pulled over. It has a series of mostly Japanese artists who take the songs from The Only Daughter, Blemish, The Heart Knows Better, and remixes them into adding some different elements to it. Makes them, kind of turns them inside out, adds some orchestration in some cases, or just really kind of strips them as bare bones as the a cappella thing, and then some literally blemishes of music come in. But an incredible record for those who want something a little challenging, but not so out there. Before I continue with sort of a little sampling of remixes I just thought I would showcase, I want to go to one more. David Sylvian, Dyed in the Wool, the Manafon Variations. Now this is a double set that's remixed in the same way as the Blemish of his album Manafon. And I love this record. This came out on vinyl finally a couple years ago. I've had the CD for many years. This literally just came out along with the Blemish remix, and it's a beautiful, obviously, package. Now, the one thing about these two albums, if you are a headphone person, I'm really not at home. Years ago, I was. There you go. I mean, this is an excellent record for headphoning, for the sounds flowing through your head, through the left and right channel into the center stage. Really interesting. This is the more challenging record between this and Blemish. So if you think Blemish is a challenging record and a little too obtuse for you, this is more so. But I think the adventure side of it, the adventurous side of this, makes for a really kind of unique experience and a really wonderful experience. Again, compared to a lot of avant-garde artists and minimalists, this isn't way out there. But compared to, singer-songwriter, Japan, and the early David Sylvian album, it is a more obscure and more challenging for most listeners. But I just think this album, Manafon Variations, is just really a beautiful companion piece. And this is, to me, is where remixes work when another entity kind of brings it, and not just for the sake of updating it for a modern audience. That's not what this is about. This isn't what the Beatles did with their remixed albums. I'm going to get to that in a little bit, and a lot of other artists as well. It's not exclusive, obviously, to the Beatles, but there's this whole kind of resurgence and reevaluation of records from the 1960s, even into the 70s, where they were recorded and mastered in a certain way with far left and far right and vocals on one side, and now to bring it into contemporary where vocals or certain instruments are dead center right in front of you. Now, just a little side note, people ask the question, what's the difference between a remix and a remaster? Well, a remaster ultimately doesn't change the sound of the record, or doesn't change the recordings, doesn't take the multi-tracks. They don't go to the multi-tracks and bring up the bass and maybe bring up the piano or vocals, or bring something that was buried originally, or get rid of something that was buried originally. That's when you remix something completely, going back to the original tapes and taking it apart and changing it. Remaster is basically, once you have a final mix, the remastering engineer takes those, let's say 10 or 12 recordings for an album, and kind of makes them somewhat even, which means you could be recording at different studios at different times, and there's volume situations, there's certain differences in 12 songs, and you want to kind of make them similar, the levels similar, so you're not playing track one, all of a sudden it blasts in track two, and track three is way below. You want to kind of level it out, and sometimes a mastering engineer will do some EQ changes. Sometimes, the tapes and the mixes, it's pretty much spot on. that a mastering engineer just has to keep the levels together. That is a simplistic explanation. Nothing here is about remasters, only remixes. I want to show a couple of things that I think are very successful. Now, of course, in the late 70s, well into the 80s, there was a whole thing of the remix singles, the 12-inch singles, dance singles. Mixologists and DJs would play, 45 RPM, some cases 33s, 12-inch maxi singles on the DJ floor, on the dance floor. They'd be, loud and jacked up a lot. And a lot of artists, a lot of record companies would do remix version of it. Sometimes they would do it in-house. Sometimes they would farm it out. And there's, of course, I'm not going to even mention all the names because I don't know them all. A lot of remix engineers that were famous for that, especially in the club scene going on in New York and London and other cities around. And I want to show an album that I really like, and this is from 1984, and this is Echo and the Bunnymen. This is Ocean Rain. This is my favorite of the Echo and the Bunnymen. I think this is one a little maturing more. Liverpool band. I love all their stuff, Crocodile. I just like this band, and they're still around, and I just quite like this. But one of my favorite 12 inches, which I got, that Sire Records put out, and I believe this is an American copy, but obviously came out in the US, and the song The Killing Moon on here, which is a brilliant, epic piece of music. Well, on here is The Killing Moon, the all-night version, which is 9 minutes and 12 seconds. So sometimes these 12 inches would have just a remix, upbeated dance version, more percussion, more bass for the dance floor, really, jacked up. Sometimes they would have an extra track of a live or a B-side, like a single. But the 12-inch single was a thing, and there are certain bands that I would continue to grab in 12-inch singles. And again, late 70s throughout the mid to late 80s. I mean, it's still a thing to some point, but at this point, this is great, 45 RPM. But to me, this is an excellent, successful application of a remix, and especially on that song, The Killing Moon, from 1984's album by Echo and the Bunnymen. Love that. Another one which I think was successful, just from a few years ago, and this kind of illustrates the best possible packaging and marketing of a remix. I've always been a fan of Pink Floyd's Animals. This is a fantastic album from 1977. The great image from Hypnosis, this creation at the Battersea Power Station off the Thames in London. This is a dark album. This is a brooding album for a Pink Floyd album. They've had a lot of stuff like this, but especially after Wish You Were Here and Dark Side of the Moon. This is really a beautifully intense black album, if you will. I mean, this cover really illustrates well the music inside here. Some people didn't like that, but I do take note and take issue with this revisionist thing that all of a sudden, 50 years later or 45 years later, you have to do something completely different. But that's exactly what Pink Floyd did here, the 2018 remix. So right away, what do you notice on the difference on these covers? Aside from the screen back, black and white, no color sucked out, or this dark, brooding, bleak image of basically that's what London looked like after all the, cleaning the buildings, getting all that soot and sog off the buildings over the years. But this really brings it back and opens it up. A total different remix. And the brilliance about this, doing this entirely different take on the Battersea Power Station in black and white, sucking out all the colors, right away on the shelf, whether it's your shelf or the record store shelf in years to come, you know that this is the remix version of this album. You don't have to have some hype sticker that's long gone. You don't have the hype sticker here. So come on. I mean, this is the way. This is the brilliant way to do a remix. Now sometimes they're successful more than others. I think this is very successful. Now, I definitely like the darker version here, but this does open up some of the instrumentation. It's a little bit of a cleaner sound. Some people like that. Some people feel it's more contemporary. But I just love what Hypnosis did with the cover and how it was remixed by James Guthrie, who's been working on the reissues of the Pink Floyd catalog for the last decade or so. Very successful. Love this version. And I think this version. So what's great about this, it's an alternative version. You still have the original, and it's still in print this way. But if you have an interest to look further, you can get this. Brilliant. Why can't they all do that, right? Yoko Ono's Walking on Thin Ice for John. This was released a year after John died. This was the last song that John and Jack Douglas and Yoko remixed, basically mixed, the night he was shot. And he actually had the cassette in his pocket or in his hand when he was killed. Came out as a 12-inch single. It was a dance hit. It's a great piece of music. It's a tragic piece of music. It's horrifying and beautiful and intense with this great searing, just assault-like guitar of John Lennon on here. That's his sound on here. What could have been, what should have been, what continued. I always said when I first heard, I got a promo of Starting Over 12-inch backed with Kiss 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 about a month or two before Double Fantasy came out. And when I listened to it, as much as I like the John Lennon retro, kind of Elvis-y, Starting Over song, that thing, I thought Kiss 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 was the future, was the great song. She was doing what the punk artists and the post-punk artists, obviously the B-52s that emulated her. Kiss 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 was the fucking song that kicked ass, with her building up of that orgasm in that song. But I just love this. This is incredible. Again, at 45. Some years later, there's been a lot of different mixologists, I know that's cocktail people, but have done this song and reworked it and changed it. She leaves Geffen Records, and this is Cape Clear remix and Walking on Thin Ice re-edited. I have various versions on CD, on vinyl, of Walking on Thin Ice that has been, again, turned inside out, slowed down, sped up, added drums, added percussion. Incredible sounding thing. This has the re-edit, 17 minutes on it. And I have a series of Yoko Ono records. One more just to show you. This was an interesting album. I think this is worth a revisit for some people. This is the sole album of Yoko Ono's from 1985, produced by Bill Laswell and Yoko Ono. Bill Laswell, of course, from the Golden Palominos, and with Johnny Lydon and Africa Bombata, with World Destruction. He always had that great, intense bass sound, and he produced this album. This is a really good album. Tony Williams, the jazz drummer, is on it. It's got Sly and Robbie on bass and drums on here as well. Shankar on violin, Eddie Martinez guitar. It's just Anton Fear again on some percussion too. Tony Levin on the whistle. And it's a really good Yoko album. And it has that 80s, very percussive, dance, disco-y, modern thing going. And then there was this version, which is kind of cool. This is Hell in Paradise, a song from the album. And you have a club version on here from Star Piece, and Hell in Paradise, a dub version, single version. So I love that they mix it up and you have this option. Yoko Ono is an artist that in the late 90s into the 2000s had a renaissance in the club scenes. And a lot of DJs were remixing and just taking her songs and redoing them for the floor. And that's why a whole series of 12-inch were put out by Polygram and by some of the other labels of Yoko Ono pieces. And they're all kind of really interesting. Obviously, like everything else, some works better than others. Then we have this masterpiece, Say, Say, Say. Now, I'm not a really big fan of this song, but of course, everyone, including Paul McCartney and everyone else, would do this series of remixes. And of course, this collaboration with Michael Jackson. And on here, you have the remix by John Jellybean Benitez. And he did a lot of stuff, I believe, for Madonna. And he was one of the hot tickets for a number of years in the remix scene in New York. And here you go. You got Say, 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 the remix version. And then you have Say, 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 an instrumental Jellybean remix as well. And then you have Ode to a Koala Bear, produced by George Martin. Paul's got to be cute always at some point. I'm not a fighter, Paul. I'm a lover. Good Night Tonight. This is the last incarnation of Wings before McCartney gets busted, 1979. Around right that sweet period, Good Night Tonight. One of the great bass riffs of Paul McCartney in the disco days. Like every band was doing disco. I have a great version of Miss You by the Rolling Stones. There are countless that I'm not including here that I could, and I actually like those elongated versions. The Stones were doing it, he was doing it, Paul McCartney. In fact, what was great about this at the time, I remember Daytime, Nighttime Suffering was a B-side, which is an incredible single. Not really a dance thing, but it was a great song. Relegated to a B-side, which is unfortunate. But I love this, and of course I have again, disco singles, the radio station only promo copies. This is Not For Sale. Good Night Tonight, the long version, and Good Night Tonight, the single version. Different mixes, different takes, different edits. That's the whole thing of the remix series. One last thing before I get into the last things. Makes no sense, does it? Remember Stars on 45? I can't find my copy. It's in my Beatle collection, where they basically took an entire side of a record, snips of Beatles songs, actual Beatle recordings, and added that drum thing. That disco drum thing is the same drum beat throughout the entire 20 minutes or whatever it is on that side. And they just do snippets. So everything from Yesterday to She Loves You to whatever the Beatles song is with that thump, thump, thump. Oh, it's atrocious. But there was a thing, Stars on 45. Everybody seemed to have their version of that. This is interesting because it's not quite, this is more of a mashup. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole mashup thing tonight, but the movie Medley. Now, there was that comp called Real Music. Remember when Capitol Records was issuing comps, rock and roll music, love songs, the whole bit. They did one called Real Music, which are songs from the movies. And they put this out, a medley of songs, excerpts from the LP Real Music, back with Fab Four on film. The Beatles talk about Hard Day's Night. So side two is interviews. Side one are clips of the songs mashed together, flowing together. It's terrible, but it's a sampler. I don't know if radio would actually ever play this thing, but it kind of gets you in the mood to collect it and everything. So let's go now with the good and the bad of remixed albums, taking classic albums and remixing them for new audiences, for radio, for streaming, so everything sounds jacked up, loud, or in the case of the Beatles, and I'm using sort of the Beatles here as my template here, because I think everyone knows the music, whether you like them or not, and if you don't like them, why are you even here, right? But there's this whole thing about a lot of music, not just with the Beatles, but since the Beatles were so popular in the early 60s, where in the day, stereo was new things, mono is the way you want it. That's what the artist intended. That's another conversation as well. But what's really interesting is that a lot of times the vocals would be far left, instrumentation on the right. You don't get that center vocals until maybe 1967, 68 especially, when they started getting rid of mono and, stereo imaging was centered. Now, I'm one that I like stereo floating in and out my headphones, my ears. I don't really do headphones a lot, but my speakers. Going back to that, the reason for this whole video, David Sylvian with those Blemish things, those noises, literally going through your head and spiraling out. Amazing stuff. So we all know that Giles Martin has been remixing all the Beatle albums, or at least so far he's done Let It Be, Abbey Road, the White Album, Sgt. Pepper, and Revolver, my favorite Beatle album, Revolver. Again, starting with this album as early as 1966, I'm all in on stereo. I love this in stereo. I don't care if anything is not always centered. Now, I'm going to get to some earlier stuff after this, but obviously we know that Giles and the whole Beatle thing are repackaging this stuff. What's great about this, they included a mono all analog LP in here, which is great. But I'm just going to talk about the remix. Now, the good side of this is in the box set, they included this cover, the Robert Freeman cover. Robert Freeman is the photographer that did With the Beatles and Beatles for Sale and Help and A Hard Day's Night and Rubber Soul. He did all those kind of art direction to a point, but the photography. This was his submission for Revolver, this kind of montage, the whole Revolver around. That would have been a really cool cover. I think this is one of their best covers, and second only, or at least along with Sgt. Pepper. I love this. So I'm glad they chose this Klaus Voormann illustration and montage. But this is great. But in the box set for the remix and the extra tracks, this is actually the extra tracks. I'm sorry, not the remix. This is incredible, okay? Different versions, different takes. This is a fun addition. Now, they're not selling this separate, so it really doesn't matter. But if you wanted to get the remix of the album, I think you could get it separately. This is the remix, okay? This is the original. What the You have no way of knowing that this is a remix. That is one of my biggest complaints, especially with the Beatles. If you're gonna do a remix, have something permanent for us to know it's the remix. And you can't even go buy an original mix in the stores unless it's been sitting there for years or you find a used copy. This is the remix, unless you look at the date small, but you need to do something. Remember that Pink Floyd album? Different cover? Do a different cover. Maybe, put this in the store. Now, maybe people won't know what the fuck this is in the store because they don't recognize it, but at least do something that tells you directly that they've remixed the album. Again, I think this is pretty good, but to me, it's still uneven. The remix is uneven. Has it replaced the original? No way in hell. It doesn't replace it. I don't even think this album needed a remix personally. But, you listen to now Eleanor Rigby, and where a lot of it was, Paul's vocal in the left channel, I believe, and the harmonies and things coming in on the right. Now it's kind of more centered. Who gives a crap? That is the art that they created at the time in stereo. Buy a mono if you want that. This concept of making stereo records emulate mono records, to me, is bullshit from my point of view. So this is one that is, halfway successful. The problem I have, and I didn't pull all of them out, with Sgt. Pepper, it's uneven. The remix is uneven. It just seems like it's different masterings and stuff. And I don't know all the technical stuff like some of you people out there or the experts, but I just know what I enjoy, the music I listen to. The music's stupid, right? And I don't think this stuff needs it. I understand the marketing and the reevaluation to a point, but at least keep the regular mixes in print and visually change that. Probably a better example, and this to me is a more dramatic example. The last couple of years, 2 years ago now has it been, these were reissued and expanded. They did it as a 3-record set. They got lazy on the vinyl. They didn't put it in chronological order. What they did is, they added a 3rd disc. Like they just slapped it on. Start from scratch, recut it. Come on. This is the original, but they remixed it. And of course, what a lot of people seem to want, not me, all those early Beatles songs where the vocals are far left, they centered it. But I think some of this stuff is butchered. I think, it's a novelty for me to listen to in the car or listen to at home. I enjoy it, but it's not a replacement. And again, it's unnecessary as far as I'm concerned. I like the idea that they did a remaster. In fact, a couple of years ago, there was an all analog QRP press version. I think it's 2016 maybe. Find that. It's the original mixes. You can find it, but you got to know which one to look for. I think it was pressed at QRP. But there's some songs that are uneven, and there are a lot of what the fuck moments of certain mixing choices. And Giles Martin's a great engineer and a great producer, but and it's a thankless job taking the Beatles and making them different. But come on, change the cover somewhat. Do something different. So when you're holding it up, now of course this is 3 records, so you know it's the remix. But in 5 years, 10 years, no one's gonna know that. There's nowhere here does it say remix, as far as I know. Maybe you look in the details in the inside pocket on the inner sleeves. But you need to do something completely different. Make it black and white. Make it a different, draw mustaches and glasses on them or something. Make it different. Yeah. Mazzy, relax.
What's your name?
Mazzy.
Mazzy.
Mazzy. I bought your book 6 times.
I know the name, Mazzy. I know the face, but I can't remember how.
It's okay. It doesn't matter.
Now, I didn't pull it here, but I feel the same about the George Harrison, Danny Harrison, that whole group remixes. They did All Things Must Pass. I know there's this whole thing, even George, before he died, did a remix, which is, to me, terrible. I like the Phil Spector remix. It's a big record. If you listen to the original vinyl version of All Things Must Pass, it has a really good sound. Yes, some of the songs are out there, What is Life? And, oh, God. But it's really well done. You go to Phil Spector, you're going to get Phil Spector. You're not going to get, T-Bone Burnett or the guy that did Johnny Cash. What's his name? The Mr. Buddha producer. That was terrible. It was terrible. The original remix, you heard it here. I'm not the only one. All Things Must Pass, the original. In terms of the Beatles, since I'm sticking with the Beatles at the end here, I'm going to end with, I think who's doing the best job of these remixes is Sean Lennon. Although, going back, okay, I've gotten the remixes, and there's some really interesting things in it. Now, he's done some artistic decisions he's made that are somewhat controversial to some of the audience. The record that I always liked, but to me, since day one, since I got it in 1973 in the record store, my first record store was Mind Games. I like this record. I think the songs are great. The songs are there, but it's always been kind of muddy, the original pressing. Finally, in I believe the early 2000s, Yoko and team did remixes of all the CDs. And Mind Games was the biggest improvement. And for the first time in my life, Mind Games sounded great. And the only way you could get that remix on vinyl was this MoFi edition, which actually is pretty good. And it's a better remix than the original, okay? So when did this come out? I don't even know. 2004. So around that time that Yoko did those CDs, it was this. Ironically, later when the box sets came out, they reverted to the original mix, which was terrible again. I don't understand that. However, last year, obviously the CD box or the Elemental mixes, I'm not going to get into that this time. I love that. I love that. It is a discussion about what I'm talking about, remixes, and Sean and company strip back things, the meditation mixes, the Elemental mixes, almost too many options for most mere mortals and fans of John Lennon. But I love every minute of it. To me, that is great. Now, I will say they should have changed the fucking cover again and done something different. This is the remix. This is probably, of all the Lennon things, of all the Beatle things, this is the John Lennon remix that improves tenfold on the original, on anything else. It is so good. Clarity, these great musicians. In the Elemental mixes and the strip back mixes on the other things, there are some great elements of the various musicians, from guitar to keyboards, and it's just wonderful. Not everyone needs that stuff, and I'm a realist about that. But this has one disc of the proper album remix and one disc of outtakes, and I think this is probably one of the best remix jobs that the Lennon estate has done. But again, change the cover. Like, you could buy this separate in store. You can buy it in a box. There's various huge packages and repackages that you can get. Somehow, it needed it to be different. That is my objective with all the remixes. I'm fine with remixing, but make it different so it's an option. And in most cases, keep the original in print or available. Now, maybe you don't want to keep my games in print, the original, because it's terrible. So everything I'm saying is the opinion only of this content creator, but I know what I like, and I just wanted to express and share the good, bad, and the ugly of remixes. David Sylvian kind of gave me the inspiration to create this video today, and that's it. So thanks for watching. Mazzy loves you.